Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis. To me, that feels like the real main event here, so that's what I'm going to talk about first. And God, I am kicking myself really hard here because I had an 8-fight parlay going on last night, and I was so close to adding Dustin Poirier to it. And if I did, it would have made my payout from $550 all the way to $1,700, and I was so close to doing it. So close, but I could not bring myself to do it. Benoit Saint Denis is so dangerous. But he left huge openings in his stand-up that I knew Poirier could capitalize on, but it was way too unpredictable. I'll tell you what, the only thing I was certain of with this matchup was this is not the kind of fight that you want to make 3 separate videos about, reiterating the same point that you think Benoit Saint Denis is going to 100% win. At least that I was pretty sure of. But others weren't so lucky. But I'm not going to name any names. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but it was Lucas Tracy. And I checked out his newest video, and of course, some people are definitely giving him the business for that very bold prediction. And he actually supplied, though, a very interesting counterpoint to some of the criticism. And that was, well, Benoit Saint Denis did have a staph infection, to be fair. And in fact, Benoit Saint Denis himself came out after the fight and said, I was on antibiotics, it killed my cardio, I couldn't perform how I normally do, And look, being on the antibiotics 100% affects your cardio. I mean, there's no question about that. But here's the issue with using that as an excuse for why you lost in this matchup. Benoit Saint Denis has always left openings for him to get countered hard while he's pressuring his opponents. I looked at this pretty in depth in my breakdown for this fight, but look at Benoit's fight against Thiago Moises. He had him pressured up against the fence, he was unloading on him, but he was leaving himself open to get countered, and Thiago Moises was countering him. And he was landing counters very, very clean, and if there's one thing you know about Dustin Poirier, if you unload on him recklessly, he will crack you. I mean, that's exactly what happened in the Michael Chandler fight. And obviously, Dustin Poirier hits way harder than Thiago Moises does. So look, I'm 100% sure that taking the antibiotics, having a staph infection, did not help his cardio, right? I mean, of course. But Benoit fought this fight exactly like he fights all of his other fights, to a T. Put a ton of pressure on your opponent, get them backed up to the fence, smother them, constantly look for takedowns, constantly look for the submission. The only variable that made a difference in that game plan was the fact it was Dustin Poirier he was doing it against. But of course, I want to be fair here. For anybody who watched the fight, you're well aware Benoit Saint Denis had Poirier in trouble. I mean, his grappling is extremely high level. So by no means is it a horrible pick to go with Benoit Saint Denis to win this fight. That's not the issue. The issue is you made 3 separate videos saying you thought 100% he was going to do it, and now that he lost, the excuse is, oh, well, he did have a staph infection, though. That's why he recklessly unloaded in front of Poirier with horrible defense like he always does. It was because he has a staph infection. That just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Seeing that made me a little irked, I'll be honest. But the other fascinating conundrum to this fight was Dustin Poirier's guillotine attempts. For starters, I absolutely loved the fact that Daniel Cormier exclaimed, "Oh, it's his best submission." And then Jean Anik had to be like, "He's never actually finished a fight by guillotine." And then DC goes, Yep, you're right. Yep, that sounds about right." And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's actually not his best submission, DC. You're just talking again, like you always do. But what exactly is the problem with Dustin's guillotines? Does he just suck at it? Does he just literally have no idea what he's doing? Well, when you look at the very first guillotine he attempted in this fight, the reason he went for it was because he was already getting taken down. Benoit, he drops for the double leg, and he connects his hands behind Poirier's legs. So at this point, Poirier is going to get taken down no matter what he does. And that's the reason why he goes for the guillotine. And it was actually very tight. It was the tightest guillotine of this entire fight. The first thing that's evident about it was that Benoit immediately needed to escape. And the escape was beautiful. A lot of times to take pressure off the guillotine, people will kind of roll to their side, which is what Khabib did when Dustin was attempting his guillotine on him. But the problem with that is your opponent can then use it to sweep and come up on top. So what Benoit did, jumped over backwards and then turned into him to stay on top. Really nice escape. And the reason why this attempt was so tight was because, look, in order to finish the guillotine, you need to be putting pressure on both sides of your opponent's neck. And you can see with how deep Benoit's head was stuck in this submission, this was absolutely happening. And if Poirier had locked full guard, I think he would have finished this. The only reason he was able to escape was because he jumped over the top because Poirier didn't have the guard. And then the second guillotine attempt Dustin had was a little different than his MO. Usually he goes for arm-in guillotines, but this was a high elbow, which actually is usually a lot tighter than an arm-in guillotine. The problem is, though, especially the way he had it in this sequence, was that he didn't have any control over Benoit's body. So Saint Denis just stood up and started fighting the hands, got them disconnected, and then he was safe. And the third guillotine Dustin went for was again a high elbow. And the issue is here, again, you need to put pressure on both sides of your opponent's neck. And with Dustin's left arm, he's reaching in, grabbing his own hand, hiking it up. So he's putting pressure there, but look at the other side of Benoit's neck. I mean, you can see it. And if you can see it, that means Dustin doesn't have it controlled. It's not deep enough. It's certainly choking him, but it's not going to put him to sleep. And because his head isn't all the way in, it makes it way easier to slip out. And then, in between rounds, Dustin's corner tells him, do not do any more guillotines. For the love of everything holy, avoid that submission like the plague. Please do not try to guillotine him. And the second round starts, and Dustin immediately goes for a guillotine. And just look side by side at this guillotine attempt and the very first one Dustin tried. You see with the first one how deep Benoit's head is stuck in the submission. Both sides of his neck are being covered. Versus here, you just visually see this side of Benoit's neck is not in the submission. It's not in the choke, which is why it's so easy for him to slip his head out and why Dustin will not be able to finish him with that attempt. So let's answer the question. Is Dustin horrible with the guillotine? Is this his worst submission? Well, I'll tell you what. If he was able to lock full guard in that very first attempt, then Benoit would not have been able to jump over the back to escape. And he may have been able to finish him. I mean, I'm telling you, that guillotine was different than all the rest. That one was really in. So I think Dustin is capable of hitting the guillotines. But it's just such a high-risk strategy. To be honest with you, it seemed to me like Dustin, at a certain point, he was just trying to prove something. He's gone for this guillotine so many times. He's never been able to hit it. He was very close on that first one. He knew that, and he really wanted to make a statement. I understand if he knows he's already getting taken down. Okay, go for it. See if you can maybe pull something off. But, God, Dustin really needs to stop jumping guillotines. But in the end, it didn't matter because Benoit unloaded on Dustin like he does in all of his other fights. He left himself open to get countered, and Dustin capitalized. Saint Denis, being only 27 years old and having the grappling skills he does, I think he's going to be around for a long time. He can 100% be a future champion. He just really needs to focus on boxing, work on his defense, leave less openings, and he's going to be a serious problem in this division.